Pastors are supposed to quote the Bible or maybe some famous theologian, but sometimes I find inspiration in some of the strangest places. For instance, I like Winnie the Pooh. I like it when he says, "Oh, bother." That sometimes just captures how I feel. Or when Winnie the Pooh says, "Some people care too much," I think that's called love. Or when he says, "If the person you're talking to doesn't appear to be listening, be patient. It may be simply that he has a small piece of fluff in his ear." I love Winnie the Pooh. One time he says to his friend Tigger, "A day without a friend is like a pot without a single drop of honey left inside." We all need friends. We all need them. We need them to ground us when we get too far out there sometimes. Do you have some of those friends that can often ground you? I overheard some of our students talking about taking campus trips and having tours around the different campuses around our states. And when I was at Southern Seminary, that was one of the things that I enjoyed to do. When a prospective student came, I liked to be one of those that volunteered to take them around and show them around the buildings and the classes and to be excited. And oftentimes we were paired with our friends, and my friend Wayne went with me sometimes. And one time I was so excited, and I was talking all about the Josephus Bowl, which is just this big grassy area out in the middle, and how we like to gather and talk there. And I was just going on and on and on. And my friend Wayne looked at him and said, "Sometimes Nelson's like a stop sign flapping in the wind." I didn't really appreciate that at that time. But I thought, now Wayne's one of those few folks that could say that to me, and I don't get upset. Because I know that he loves me dearly. A good friend, as Arthur Bisbane says, can tell you what is the matter with you in a minute. He may not seem like such a good friend after telling, however. But good friends do that for us. They tell us the truth. As a proverb says this morning, wounds of a friend can be trusted, but the enemy multiplies with kisses. True friends are those who are honest with us, who help us to grow. Flattery is nice. We all like to hear good things about ourselves, and we need those things, but true friendship helps us grow. I one time heard a convocation speaker say, "Now I'm supposed to get up here and tell you that you can be anything you want to be. That if you want to be the President of the United States, you can be the President of the United States. That perhaps you're going to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company." And instead, she said this: "All that is not true." She said, "You can't be just anything you want to be. Everybody's not going to be the president. Everybody's not going to be an astronaut. Everybody's not going to be an actor or a model. But you can be who God has called you to be. You have a very unique set of gifts and skills. God has created you for a purpose. You need to become who you are, who God is calling you to be." I liked that convocation speaker. I liked that she was so honest about that we sometimes think out there and think we have to be something more than we are. But friends tell us the truth, and they help us. Now, friends also do the opposite. They pick us up when we are down. Proverbs 27:9 says, "Perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice." Do you have some of those folks who can pick you up when you're down, when life hits you hard? I remember going through a very, very difficult situation. My heart was broken, and I thought life just was over. The pain was very unbearable, and I didn't think I could take it. And my friend Ben came and said, "Nelson, let's take a walk." And we walked, and I talked, and I poured out my heart, and I poured out my griefs. And Ben just listened to me. And towards the end of the walk, he finally spoke. And this is what he said. He said, "Nelson, it won't always feel this way." it won't always feel this way. He reminded me of the truth that though we have those times in life that might knock us down, that they are not permanent, that there is always more to life. And he said, and I believe that you can make it through today and on to that tomorrow God has for you. We all need those kinds of friends that remind us that life can be more than we think it is at the moment. Sometimes life happens to us and it is difficult and we need those friends to pick us up. Sometimes we make fools of ourselves. Now, if you're a public speaker like I am, sooner or later you're going to say something very stupid. We all do it. When you talk this much, sooner or later you're going to make a mistake. I remember one time I was preaching along and I had this wonderful illustration about James Earl Jones. The problem is when I told the illustration, I said James Earl Ray. Now, if you don't know the difference in those guys, James Earl Jones is that wonderful African-American actor who has that deep bass voice. You may know him as Darth Vader. I like to think of him as Mufasa in The Lion King. And the illustration was about how he was volunteering at a children's camp for underprivileged kids. He was going and reading them stories around the campfire. And I just thought that was a great illustration. This guy with this great deep bass voice comes and reads stories to kids. But the congregation was thinking about James Earl Ray and wondering why in the world would a convicted felon, the man who killed Martin Luther King Jr., be reading stories to kids. And at the end of the sermon, someone came up and handed me a note to explain the difference. And I was so embarrassed. But I'll never forget this one lady, her name's Sandy. She was so sweet. She came up, she said, Pastor, I was just thinking, well, that was so nice that that felon had repented and was doing good stuff. That was just a really good illustration. We all make fools of ourselves from time to time. And we need friends who, as Lauren Peter says, you can always tell a true friend. It's when you've made a fool of yourself and he doesn't feel like you've done a permanent job. Friends remind us that even when we mess up, there is more to us. Friends come along and help carry burdens for us. Again, the proverb says, do not forsake your friend or friend of your family, and do not go to your relative's house when disaster strikes you. Better is a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. Someone once said our family has to take us in, but our friends have a choice. Our friends are those who stick with us through thick and thin. Don't you love that song, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother? Most of you remember it from when the Hollies put it out. That saying, though, is the saying of Boys Town. If you don't know Boys Town, it was founded by the Catholic priest, Father Edward Flanagan, in 1917. He took in disadvantaged children and he cared for them. And one day around 1941, he saw a photo of a boy with another boy on his back, and across the bottom it said, he ain't heavy, he's my brother. Father Flanagan thought so much of that, he said, that's it. That's what Boys Town is all about. And so he had a statue commissioned. And there is that statue in Boys Town. Later on in the 70s, when they admitted girls, they had another statue commissioned. And there's also a picture of a young girl and another girl on her back that says, she ain't heavy. She's my sister. Friends are those who come along and help us. Or as Walter Winchell says, a real friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out. Do you remember in the book of John, in John 6, Jesus has this great crowd following him around. And he starts talking about the cross, about how he's going to die and how if you're going to follow him, you must take up your cross as well. And as he's preaching that sermon, something strange happens. The folks on the edge start kind of just going away. And then more go away and more go away. And he keeps talking. He's talking very seriously to the crowd. And all of a sudden, it goes from hundreds down to the 12 disciples. And Jesus turns to them and says, do you want to leave too? To which Simon Peter says, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. Friends are those folks who, when the rest of the world is deserting you, come and stand by you and say, you are a holy child of God. You are my friend, because friends make us stronger. One of my favorite proverbs from the 27th chapter here is that as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Jan Yeager, in her book, Friend Shifts, The Power of Friendship to Influence Our Lives, tells about her friend Joyce. Joyce was trying to get a job. And so Jan called her one day and just to see how she was doing. And Joyce said, I'm very, very anxious. She said, I have found out that there are 90 people who have applied for this same job, and I don't see how I got a chance. And Joyce said, well, how can I help you? Jan said that. And Joyce replied, just hearing your voice has helped me tremendously. You have made me stronger. Do you have those folks in your life that you just hear their voice and it helps make you stronger? As Thomas Watson said, we don't need to make friends who are comfortable to be with us. Rather, make friends who will force you to level yourself up, to be better than you can be. I'll never forget years ago when I became the new pastor of a church. A lot of folks were coming by, greeting me and welcoming me. They're saying, Pastor, we're just so glad you're here. We've been out without a pastor for a while, and we're so glad you're here, and you're going to do great here. And then this guy named Roscoe came by. Roscoe came down, and he sat in and said, Nelson, we're glad you're here. And one day you're going to leave. And I thought, well, that's a strange way to welcome a new pastor. And then he said, and when you do, we expect you to be better than when you came. And then he said, Nelson, our church is like a launching pad. And he got real excited and he started telling me about all of the previous pastors of that church. He talked about one who had gone on to help start the children's home of North Carolina and had been a president of the children's home. He talked about another one who had gone on to teach at Southeastern Seminary and how proud they were of him. And he talked about 2 or 3 others who had gone to some very large churches across the Southeast. He said, one day you're going to leave. We hope it's not for quite a while. But when you go from this place, we expect you to do something great because we're investing in your ministry. Justin, I feel the same about you this morning. As you go from this place, we have been privileged to walk with Justin through his seminary years. He has learned from us and we have learned from him. He has done a wonderful job with us, and he will continue to be our friend and in our hearts and our prayers. And we expect great things from you because we know you have great things in you and a great God who will bring them out. You see, friends know who we are and they love us anyway. They know the best of us and the worst of us. Again, in the book of Proverbs, we find this: a friend loves at all times. We all need those people who will be with us in the good, in the bad, in the worst of times. I'm grateful to have one of those friends in my wife, Valerie. When I had heart surgery a few years ago, she was right there by my side. She got a hotel room, but she didn't stay in it because she stayed right there beside me because she wanted to make sure that everything was done right. And she wrote down every prescription that came in and I took. She fluffed my pillow 100 times a day. And let me tell you something. I was one of the grumpiest people ever lived in that week. I was horrible because I was in pain. And yet she was right there with me. I'll tell you another little secret. You get the good Nelson at church. That grumpy Nelson comes out a lot in different places, and usually at home. And yet we choose to love one another in our best and our worst. As someone once said, a friend is someone who understands your past, believes in your future, and accepts you just the way you are. A few weeks ago, I preached about St. Patrick, that Celtic way of Christianity. The Celtic Christians have a word named Annan Karam. It means a soul friend. Don't you like that? A soul friend. It is someone who is a spiritual guide or a teacher or a companion. It's someone who walks with you through life. Some years ago, my friend Matt Miller came to me. Matt's a Lutheran pastor. Matt came and said, Nelson, we've been friends for a while, and I want to ask you a favor. And I said, what's that, Matt? And he said, would you be my spiritual director? And I said, Matt, I am so honored. I would love to do that. What's a spiritual director? And Matt said, well, Nelson's just someone who will spend some time with me once a month or so. Let me pour out my heart. Let me tell you what's going on. And all you got to do is listen. And when I finish talking, you ask me this question. Where is God in all of this? Where is God in all of this? And I said, man, I think I can do that. Later on, I got interested in spirituality and actually went and did training to become a spiritual director. But Matt had it right. After 2 years of that training, I found out that he captured it. A spiritual director, a spiritual companion, a spiritual friend is someone who listens to you and then points you back to God. He says, where is God in all of this? Because you see, ultimately, God is the greatest friend of all.